Who would have thought that a seemingly regular high schooler would go on to become one of the best vampire slayers known to mankind? All Buffy wished for was an ordinary life in her little cove of Sunnydale, California. Instead, her fate made Buffy battle the likes of an all-encompassing incarnate of evil to a jilted dark sorceress. In this Marvellous video, we're taking a nostalgic journey to the chilling escapades of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The 1997 show, which was inspired by the 1992 film of the same name, portrayed some of the most iconic villains in television history. Vampires, demons, primordial entities, you name it, there's nothing this chosen slayer hasn't faced. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The First Evil. This non-corporeal entity was one of Buffy's most formidable foes. It was even speculated that the First Evil was Buffy in a far-off dimension. But as for what we know, it all began during one cozy Christmas in Sunnydale when Angel, the vampire with a human soul, was plagued with horrific dreams. All his regrettable actions of the past returned to haunt him. Not only this, Angel's nightmarish visions were also trying to convince him to kill Buffy. Driven nearly insane, Angel decided a better fate would be to end his own life rather than kill Buffy. When the Slayer caught on to what was happening, she traced Angel's nightmares to an entity named the First Evil. It was said to be older than the first humans, even more ancient than the old ones, aka demons from the primordial age. According to the oracle beast Beljoxa's Eye, the First Evil cannot be fought, it cannot be killed. It has been and always will be. Since before the universe was born, long after there is nothing else, it will go on. So obviously, the First Evil was an amortal entity, not immortal, but a being beyond the concept of mortality itself. The First Evil wished for nothing more than to punish humankind while also destroying the line of slayers, of which Buffy was a part. It did manage to kill a considerable number of potential slayers in Season 7. Remember that the First Evil was beyond the binary of male or female, but its most preferred form was to shapeshift into Buffy, appearing to the Slayer as her own worst enemy. The First Evil could morph into those who had died. For this reason, it chose to clone the undead vampire named Drusilla. Glory, or Glorificus the Beast, was a goddess of a hell dimension before anything. She once ruled this realm with two other hell gods, but soon her sheer power and thirst for cruelty superseded their authority. So the other two insecure gods of hell launched a coup against Glory, who could not be killed, so she was exiled instead. Glory found herself bound to a mortal shell, the body of Benjamin Wilkinson. But like we said, she was far too powerful, so she chose to appear as a beautiful woman instead, although she did manifest in Benjamin's body every now and then. Being an immortal body did dampen her powers, but she was still a force to be reckoned with. Glory's ambitions were more self-absorbed compared to the First Evil. She was in search of the key, a nexus of energy which would have allowed her to return to her hellish kingdom. The only catch? Using this key would erase all boundaries between dimensions, essentially letting hell reign on Earth. In Glory's bloody pursuit of the key, she tore apart the Order of Dagon, which was the protector of this nexus. She went as far as to torture the lone surviving monk till Buffy rescued him. Eventually, her power overwhelmed her mortal body, which led her to go insane and become even more unstable than she already was. Perhaps this was payback for her most chilling power, being able to absorb other people's sanity to restore her own strength while her victims were left in a torturous state of madness. Dark Willow. Now, this was really tragic, since sweet wallflower Willow Rosenberg turned to the dark side in the face of her lover's death. Willow's story begins as a shy, nerdy girl who is soon approached by Buffy Summers. Soon, the two became fast friends. Fans of the show knew Willow as a powerful witch who first attempted magic when she stumbled upon the ritual of restoration on a floppy disk. She sought to re-ensoul Angel, who was Buffy's soulless lover at the time. Even after this, Willow continued practicing witchcraft in the typical ways of a teenager. For instance, she used magic to glamour a stubborn pimple on her face. When Willow and Buffy finally went off to college, the witch began dabbling in darker sorcery. sorcery. For example, when she tried to curse her boyfriend Oz, who had cheated on her with a werewolf named Veruca during her time in college, Willow joined the Daughters of Gaia, a group who claimed to be witches. But sadly, no one in this group was actually a witch, except for a fellow shy girl named Tara. Willow and Tara hit it off with their passion for witchcraft, which soon grew into a passion for one another. But Willow's proximity to witchcraft led to her eventual downfall as soon as she grew addicted to magic. This caused rifts in Willow's relationship with Tara, and she also clashed with the Scooby Gang, who had always encouraged the responsible use of magic. Willow also began acting out by hanging out with Rack, an infamous drug dealer who peddled all kinds of addictive magic. But it was Tara's tragic death which proved to be Willow's final undoing. She used Uncle Bob's magical cabinet to absorb all the dark magic it had to offer and stepped into the role of Dark Willow. Long gone was the good witch. Instead, in her place, Dark Willow sported jet black hair and gnarly veins running over her face. The pain of losing her lover was unbearable, so Willow tried to bring upon an apocalypse using the demoness Prosperpexa's powers. She also nonchalantly killed Tara's murderer, Warren Mears, by flaying him alive with her terrible magic. Drusilla, the psychotic vampire, who also went by Mother Superior, was a long-standing villain for both Buffy and Angel. Drusilla was born in the mid-19th century in London. On one of her walks in 1860, a vampire named Darla recognized Drusilla as a seer. Unbeknownst to the young girl, meeting Darla's lover, Angelus, would begin the unraveling of the worst tragedies in her life. Angelus became obsessed with possessing Drusilla, forcing upon her unimaginable mental and physical torture. He murdered her family in cold blood as she watched. Then he slaughtered her sisters from the coven she had escaped to. For Angelus, this was his twisted way of creating and preserving a perfect masterpiece. When Drusilla finally completely lost her sanity, she was forcibly turned into a vampire. Drusilla met a poet named William, who came to be known as Spike. You know, with the accent. They became lovers, causing trouble for the next 100 years. Also, Angelus was in fact Angel. And when he lost his soul yet again, he planned to push Earth into a hell dimension. Drusilla sided with Angel, while Spike, who had grown attached to Earth, allied with Buffy. Even though Drusilla was granted immortality, she often behaved in an infantile way. Not only did she possess precognitive abilities, but also the power of hypnosis. This left her victims in a trance and vulnerable to her will. She used this against a young Slayer and friend of Buffy's named Kendra Young, who was hypnotized shortly before Drusilla slit her throat. Anyanka, also known as Aod, the ex-vengeance demon, Anyanka had multiple relapses and redemptions. Aod was born in Sweden in 860, and she fell head over heels in love with a Viking warrior named Olaf. Sadly, this man slept with another woman named Randveig, which led Aod to curse his privates in the most nightmarish way. Of course, this wasn't enough, because she also cursed him to turn into an ugly troll. Her vengeful magic was noticed by a demon named Dahofran, who offered to turn Aod into a vengeance demon. Aod was knighted as Anyanka, the patron saint of scorned women. So, for the next couple of centuries, Anyanka traveled all the way from Russia to colonial Massachusetts to Chicago, fulfilling her role as an unforgivable vengeance demon. Anyanka basically possessed the power to grant vengeful wishes to those women who had been wronged. In 1998, she made her way to Sunnydale, right into the Scooby Gang under the guise of Anya Emerson. Her intention was to exact revenge on Xander for cheating on Cordelia with Willow. Soon after, Anyanka is stripped of her powers by Buffy's Watcher, Giles. Just for context, a Watcher in the Buffyverse were mentors to the Slayers, who were responsible for tracking down and cataloging a roster of demonic entities. Consequently, Anyanka went on to become not only a part of the gang, but also Xander's girlfriend. Alas, old habits die hard, as she nearly makes a rehabilitated Willow relapse into using dark magic again. When she was left jilted at the altar by Xander, she decided to become a vengeance demon again. Perhaps the worst thing she ever did was summon a Grimslaw demon, a beast which fed on human hearts. This was to grant another wish, which resulted in a whole gang of fraternity boys getting their hearts torn out. Darla. Darla the vampire was known to be Angelus' sire and one of the Master's favorites. Before she was known as Darla, she was born in the 16th century near Virginia. Her beginnings were as a sex worker who was dying of syphilis. As she died laying on her deathbed, she turned away a priest who offered to recite her last rites. She offered up her soul to the devil instead. The priest turned out to be the Master, who, as we know, was one of the feared and ancient vampires portrayed in the show. He instantly sired the girl, turned her into a vampire, and named her Darla. After she turned Liam into a vampire named Angelus, the passionate couple rampaged from Wales to London, all the way to New York. Here, their shenanigans caught up to them in the form of a vampire hunter named Daniel Holtz. Darla exacted her revenge by trapping Holtz in a cottage with the cryptic note saying, "How do you hope to save others when you can't save your own?" Okay, that's pretty on the nose. Darla and Angelus proceeded to assault and murder Daniel's wife, after which Angelus turned his daughter into an undead vampire like him. Then the worst atrocity imaginable. Darla killed Daniel's son, a defenseless infant. Daniel was fiercely loyal to his cause, thus he forced himself to kill his own daughter. Then, in the year 1767, Darla, Angelus, and another vampire couple burned a whole village well into their night of debauchery. During her time at Hellmouth and Sunnydale, Darla put on the act of a naive, shy girl, even going as far as to don a schoolgirl costume to lure her victims. She managed to maim and kill Chris Bull before stuffing his body in a locker as a warning for Buffy. But the Slayer didn't mess around, throwing a wrench in all of Darla's plans afterwards. Darla resorted to pairing up with Drusilla as the two caused mischief together. Her attempts to rekindle her romance with Angelus, now Angel, were failures, as he claimed to have felt only pure despair rather than joy when they were recklessly coupled. Faith Lehane. This Slayer broke out of her good little girl routine that everyone expected her to follow diligently. Faith's first impressions of the world were awful, with her abusive father and alcoholic mother making her earliest years hell. To cope with this, little Faith had an imaginary friend, who was actually just a vengeance demon named Malice. Even as a youth, Faith's life never took a turn for the better as she dropped out of high school and was put in a foster home. Here, she accidentally killed her first vampire. When Faith realized that her mother had been forced into prostitution by her boyfriend, she lashed out at her mom's clients, nearly killing them. Faith's actions led her to be institutionalized. But then, a small mercy arrived in the form of her first watcher, Diana Dormer, who was the embodiment of the motherly love that Faith never experienced. Faith was knighted as an official slayer when Drusilla killed Kendra Young. When she finally arrived in Sunnydale, Faith found the sense of belonging she always longed for with the Scooby Gang, although she did envy Buffy for her watcher, Giles. Soon, Faith gives in to her dark impulses when she nearly kills Deputy Mayor Alan Finch and puts the blame on Buffy. Angel tried to reprimand Faith for her behavior, as he knew what it was like to be a bloodthirsty vampire, one who could kill quickly. But Faith still turned to the dark side when she realized that the mayor was the big bad. Again, Faith offered her services as a double agent to the mayor, since he was like a father figure who gave her everything she could ask for. She didn't hesitate to kill for him, committing acts of murder like it was any other Tuesday for her. Faith was a girl with a tragic past whose self-loathing ran deep. She felt uncared for and unconsidered, so it was easy for her to hurt other people. She did undergo a redemption arc when she switched bodies with Buffy and experienced what it was like to be loved and respected by your peers. Vampire Willow. A vampiric version of Willow first appeared from an alternate reality of the Wishverse, which first appeared in Season 3, Episode 9, and was titled The Wish. Remember Anyanka, the vengeance demon with the power to grant wishes? Well, when Cordelia Chase wished that Buffy Summers had never moved to Sunnydale, Anyanka granted her wish. Cordelia was transported to an alternate reality wherein Buffy the Slayer wasn't in place to protect Sunnydale. She was busy in Cleveland instead. As a result, the town was overrun by vampires led by the Master, who wasted no time in establishing the new vampire order. In this reality, Willow and Xander are bloodthirsty vampires who enforce a strict curfew for the residents of Sunnydale. Cordelia was cursed with rotten luck as Vampire Willow caught up to her and killed her in cold blood. Vampire Willow was the Master's second in command. She even helped him invent a machine that harvested humans' blood. Even worse, this blood was forcefully drawn from her human cow. captives. When Anyanka's spell goes wrong, Vampire Willow ends up in the Buffyverse, where she observes how the vampires are kept in check by the diligent Slayer. She vowed to turn Sunnydale like it was in the Wishverse by rallying a gang of hungry vampires. But as Vampire Willow met her good witch Willow, her Buffyverse counterpart, things got weird really quick. You know, since Vampire Willow felt sexually attracted to Willow. As you can guess, this did not end well for the greedy vampire. Maggie Walsh, a psychology professor at UC Sunnydale by day and an evil military genius by night, Maggie Walsh definitely made the cut for an iconic Buffy villain. Professor Walsh noticed Buffy in an introduction to psychology class for the first years. As a passionate academic, Professor Walsh was unrelentingly strict in her assessment, but there was a side to her that no one knew of. Just like Buffy, Walsh also led a double life as an agent for the Initiative. This was a clandestine government organization headed by Riley, which specialized in experimentation on demons and vampires. The Initiative was situated right under the university, unbeknownst to the students who attended. The organization would hunt down and capture the creatures of the night and perform horrific experiments on them, even by their unholy standards. Maggie Walsh was in charge of an initiative project named 314 Project, which involved the unnatural amalgamation of humans, machines, and demons to create the ultimate super soldier. Professor Walsh oversaw the construction of the first prototype named Adam. Due to Riley's friendship with Buffy, Walsh grew acquainted with her and even considered her to be a potential ally to the Initiative. But soon enough, she grew tired of Buffy's curious attitude and tried to kill the girl by unleashing 2 demons that were captured in the Initiative's dungeons. When this failed, Maggie resorted to using Adam to kill Buffy the Slayer. But things quickly went south when her own creation skewered her to death. Now, Adam seized the 314 Project. He started by reanimating Walsh's corpse, a true case of Frankenstein being made into Frankenstein's monster. Anyway, when an undead Walsh saw Buffy again, she tried to attack the Slayer with a bone saw, but failed miserably. The tubes which kept her alive were ripped out, and so Professor Maggie Walsh died for good, with her vision of using demons as a militia buried with her. Harmony Kendall. Was Harmony a villain or radical spokesperson for the vampires? Harmony was part of Cordelia Chase's exclusive clique known as the Cordettes, who spent most of their time bullying those they deemed uncool. Harmony really tried to make Willow and Xander's life a living hell with her cruelty. One of her victims was Marcy Ross, who was thoroughly isolated and made to feel invisible by Harmony and her friends, to the point where Marcy actually turned invisible and tried to kill her bully, in vain. Harmony took over the Cordettes when Cordelia began dating Xander. She then humiliated Cordelia to tear apart her dignity. On the graduation day for the class of '99, a battle broke out against Mayor Richard Wilkins to thwart his attempts to ascend. This was the moment Harmony was turned into a vampire by one of Wilkins' sires. When a vampiric Harmony bit a famous comedian, Andy Dick, she was photographed by the paparazzi. This launched her into the spotlight as the general existence of vampires was revealed to the world. While she loved the attention, Harmony also founded the pro-vampire, anti-slayer world order. Harmony advocated the reform vampirism movement, which consisted of ethical feeding. A vampire would have to ask for consent before feeding on someone. Alright, so Harmony wasn't a dangerous villain in the traditional sense, since her attempts to kill Buffy were laughable to say the least, but she embodied someone we've all been in fear of once. A beautiful, popular, yet terribly unkind high school bully. Amy Madison. Amy Madison was such a rat. No, really. She was also Willow's pet more than a foe to Buffy Summers. After her father abandoned them, Amy's mother was terribly cruel to Amy, to the point where food would be withheld from the little girl. She was Willow's childhood friend and would often go to her house to eat. When time for high school rolled around, Amy first met Buffy when she tried out to be a cheerleader. Amy didn't do very well, but the other suitable candidates were mysteriously injured during the process. Buffy suspected that Amy was actually a witch or Wiccan like Willow, but it was revealed that Amy's mother, who was a potent witch, had switched bodies with her daughter. We can say that this witch was the real villain, while Amy was a product of her conditioning. She did inherit her mother's powers, yet she needed to be a more skilled witch. In one of her botched spells, all the girls of Sunnydale fell in love with Xander, including the spellcaster. Blinded by envy, Amy tried to turn Buffy into a rat, but this backfired. What's What's worse was she couldn't transform back, so Willow took it upon herself to care for her ratty childhood friend. Gwendolyn Post. She claimed to be sent by the Council of Watchers to step up as Faith Lehane's watcher after her first one was killed. She heavily criticized Giles as Buffy's watcher, claiming that he had indeed lost his purpose by allowing himself to grow disillusioned. She was so ruthless in her inspection that the other watchers were convinced that she was the standard that she set, so they didn't bother looking into her background for any credibility. Gwendolyn also took up the role of a motherly mentor for Faith, but unbeknownst to the Slayer, her watcher slowly isolates her from the Scooby Gang. This was all part of her agenda. You see, Mrs. Post desired to get her hands on the legendary glove of Minigon, a magical but dangerous artifact that granted its wearer the powers of electrokinesis. Gwendolyn warned Buffy and her watcher, Giles, about the glove. She claimed that an ancient demon named Lagos was headed straight for Sunnydale in fervent search of the glove. Mrs. Post ordered Faith to fight the demon, but she couldn't, which forced Buffy to intervene and save the day. It turned out that the glove was actually with Angel. Faith tried to defend her watcher from the vampire and Buffy, but Gwendolyn called her an idiot when she finally got her hands on the glove. Just as she powered up a deadly bolt of lightning, her arm was sliced off by Buffy. In the blink of an eye, Mrs. Post was burnt to nothing more than ash, a suitable punishment for someone who greatly abused forbidden magic. Genevieve Holt, a sinister villain who brewed under the cover of apparent benevolence. Genevieve was the main antagonist in the 18th episode of Season 4, which was titled Where the Wild Things Are. She was first shown as the charitable director of the Lowell Home for Children, an orphanage for troubled teenagers who had nowhere else to go. As a strict follower of old-fashioned traditions, Mrs. Holt always punished these youths for the silliest reasons. For instance, she forcefully cut off the hair of girls she deemed to be too vain. She also made the teenagers pay for sins which were just behaviors expected for their age. She would hold their heads underwater if they dared to express their sexuality. Now, in the Buffyverse, any pent-up energy or powerful repressed emotions would manifest as apparitions. So the Lowell Home for Children turned haunted with apparitions of overly eager spirits. They possessed Buffy and Riley, who were made to fool around in the house, much to the spirits' delight. Genevieve Holt was one of the few Buffy villains who got away scot-free. She was even given an award for her goodwill, as her true abusive nature was well hidden. Lilah Morgan, the femme fatale undead executive, was mainly portrayed as Angel's enemy. Lilah was an associate of Wolfram and Hart, a law firm which catered solely to exceptionally evil clients. She was the sharpest thorn in Angel's side, and aided his attempts to protect the innocents from bloodthirsty vampires and demons. She was an excellent lawyer, but didn't really care for the law. If morally gray was a person, it would be Lilah Morgan. She had her eyes set on the position of the head of the Special Projects Division, which was occupied by Linwood Murrow. She usurped him by a clever trap built into his chair, a blade which flung out and beheaded him in a split second. That also prompted her to the title of the most iconic villain in the Buffyverse. She's always been a fan favorite for her unabashed honesty about her evil intentions. Lilah knew she worked for the bad guys, but it paid the bills. Simone Doffler. This radical terrorist first appeared in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8 comic book series. Simone was a slaypire, essentially a slayer who had been turned into a vampire. Against their will, obviously. When Buffy fought the first evil in 2003 during the Battle of Hellsmouth, Willow Rosenberg set off the Slayer activation spell. This awakened countless potential slayers around the world, which came together as a collective force. As one of the potential slayers, Simone was enrolled in the Slayer organization as part of the training squads. But her peers soon noticed that Simone's desires to learn was different from theirs. She always expressed her want to use firearms like guns instead of the traditional weapons used by Slayers. Sure enough, Simone broke away from the organization and went AWOL, accompanied by other Slayers like her. She broke into the building's armory to steal what she'd always desired: automatic weapons, grenades, and machine guns. Buffy and Simone Simone's watcher, Andrew, tracked her down to an island that she had quickly taken over. Upon confrontation, this insubordinate pirate offered to sacrifice Buffy to Charlotte, the Ragna demon, in exchange for Andrew, whom she hated with a passion. In another attempt to kill Buffy Summers, Simone's plan was disrupted by Detective Robert Dowling. She shot him point blank in the head. Way later, Simone resorted to mystical forces to try and kill Buffy. She wanted to feed the Slayer to Zompire, a vampire without sapience, or a zombie vampire. Over her entire arc, Buffy always reminded us that she wasn't the one to play around. Simone met her end, staked by a scythe. Marvellous verdict. There you have it, folks. We've spoken about every badass villain, from rebels who get off on violence to shrewd attorneys and simply scary high school bullies. Let us know down below who your favorite villain was. Each one on this list was genuinely committed to the role they played against Buffy. What good is a story if it doesn't have convincing bad guys? Or girls in this case. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.